Hey everybody. Oh, Jazz Samurai here. And it's 40 years. 40 years kind of right now since John Lennon was killed. And I wanted to do a video about that because, that my memory of that time is very strong, and my feelings about the Beatles are very strong. And their influence on me is very strong, so I thought I would do something that probably will not do justice to all of those memories. But first, about the night. So, at the time, I was 14 years old, and I'm pretty sure I'd just started high school. And so I'd been in high school for, 3 months or whatever it is. And John Lennon, as you know, was shot at night and died at night. And I had already gone to bed. And I was a huge Beatles fan. I mean, I was born a little bit too late, maybe, but I was born in 1966. And yes, I know I don't look it, but I was born in 1966. And some of my earliest memories are of listening to Beatles music. My parents were not so much into that kind of rock music or pop music, but of course it was in our house. You couldn't avoid it at that time. And I remember, hearing that music so formative in those formative years, and I was a huge Lennon fan and a McCartney fan, and I had started playing guitar by that time, so I was playing those songs. The first song I ever played in public was Beatles' "Yesterday," and that was probably a few years before this, before 1980. So, I was a big fan, and so John Lennon was dead, and it was on the news, and my parents decided not to wake me up and tell me, which is fine. I'm fine with that. Because I would imagine that would be a very difficult thing to do, to tell your son that his hero has been shot down in the street. So they didn't tell me. So in the morning I woke up, and I remember, I was coming out of the shower, and my mother said, "Oh, so I have some bad news to tell you." I can't remember if my father was there. He might have been there as well. I don't remember. And they said that John Lennon had been killed. And I was obviously shocked and devastated, as so many of my generation and older were when that happened. And my parents, to their credit, and it's kind of incredible to me still that they said this, and they said, we understand if you don't feel like going to school. So they knew that how important it was to me, and what a thing it was for me. This wasn't the first time that, some kind of episode of violence on television had entered into my life, but I think it was probably the closest, and yeah. Now, like I say, I was a big fan of the Beatles, and in the mid-'70s, I remember reading an article that John Lennon went to the same Italian restaurant or cafe or something in New York City every day and had an espresso. So this would be about 1976, 1977, something like that, and I remember reading that article and begging my father to please drive us to New York City. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm from Canada. I was born and raised right on the American border, but still, it was the American border with Michigan, and that was a long way. So I begged my father, please, drive us to New York City. Let me meet John Lennon, which of course he said no, as you would. He also said no to taking me to Paul McCartney and Wings Over America tour in 1976 in Detroit, which I wasn't too happy about, but it took me about 30 more years to see McCartney. But so I wanted to, I wanted to go and meet John Lennon. And some years later, 1990, wow, it's amazing to think that that was only like 10 years later. But in 1990, perhaps 1991, Yoko Ono came to Toronto and was playing. And she was playing at Lee's Palace. I remember that, for any of you Toronto folk out there. And she was playing at Lee's Palace. And I was a musician by that time. If I am a musician now, I was then. And so I went to see the show, but I knew somebody that was working there, as you do. So I got somebody to get me in to meet her and, shake her hand and, and say what an honor it was to meet her, which it is. I mean, I'm not one of these Yoko Ono bashers. Ironically, I'm married to a Japanese woman myself. So there you go. And, what an honor it was to meet her. And she had canceled a show earlier, a few years earlier. And so I said, I had tickets for that, and I kept them, and and so I shook her hand and said what a great influence her husband was on me, as he was on many people and on many musicians. And then again, another more than 10 years later, maybe another 20 years after that, about 2012, I was working in Frankfurt, and what happens to happen in Frankfurt is a Yoko Ono art show, and I met Yoko Ono again. So there you go. But anyway, it's, despite my jovial attitude and having the dog here, what a sad day, what a sad memory of a great man, and a great influence on my life. And I don't know why I wanted to record this, I just did, so that maybe 20 years from now, not that I have any children or will have any children, 20 years from now somebody will look at this and say, oh yeah, he really loved the Beatles. Okay, see you soon.